Hello Year 11. This is the first part of the second lesson from the unit 2.6 in double award, 2.8 in triple award on disease defence and treatment. The objective for this first part of the lesson is to understand different modes of transmission of diseases. That just basically means how do diseases spread. So hopefully you've got some ideas based on what we've all been through in the last year with the COVID-19 pandemic. So points of entry, okay, when we're looking at how diseases spread, we look at how they can actually get into our body. The most common way that we get ill is through aerosols, okay? An aerosol is when we cough or sneeze or breathe out of our mouth, any particles that we have in our body, any bacteria and viruses, instantly go into the air. So when you sneeze, you actually create quite a large surface area of these particles in an aerosol. So the common cold, flu, COVID-19 all spread in this particular way. The second point of entry is by eating contaminated food. It might be food that's not been stored correctly, so it might not have been kept at the right temperature in the fridge, and so the temperature has increased and there's more likely to be higher numbers of bacteria. It might have been food that's been touched with contaminated hands, soiled hands, okay? What we mean by soiled hands is not soil literally on the hands, dirty hands, people who haven't washed their hands, they've been to the toilet and then they've been processing and producing your food. Or food that's not been cooked properly, okay? So barbecue season is ahead of us, okay? And it's a common time for people to get upset tummies because food may be raw in the middle, but maybe cooked on the outside. So an example of this is salmonella. The next one is from touch or contact, okay? So if we have, let's say, for example, a cold sore, okay, and we touch it with our finger and then we touch somewhere else on our lip, okay, then we can transfer that cold sore to another part on our face, okay. So touch is one that is a point of entry, so that's actually on the skin. The next one is through contaminated water. We don't see this in developed countries as much because we have clean water, which we take for granted really. But in developing nations where they might have to walk for miles to find water, and then that water may be used by cattle, it might be used for bathing in, for washing in, and also used as their drinking water, then this is how diseases that are waterborne, live in water, can spread in this way. So for example, cholera is one of these particular diseases. And then we've got animals. So we've already looked at things like malaria spreading through insects, through the female mosquito biting an individual and actually injecting tiny small microorganisms that cause malaria, but also rabies through animals, mammals like rats and dogs and cats, okay, they can transfer them. The one that's not mentioned on here is through sexual contact, okay? So some diseases like HIV and chlamydia, okay, can be spread through sexual contact. So I'd be able to identify some different ways that pathogens can spread. So in your booklet, on one of the pages, there is this particular sheet. It's got at the top of the page in blue some names of some diseases. And I just want to see if you can match them up with the method of transmission, in other words, how they spread, and the prevention, okay, to prevent people catching these. Pause the video and see if you can fill this in. So, flu is transmitted in tiny droplets from coughs and sneezes. Salmonella from eating contaminated food. HIV during sexual intercourse and by drug users sharing needles to inject drugs. Athlete's foot from touching infected skin or fungus spores left on the floor, particularly in bathrooms and damp places like swimming pools. Cholera from drinking infected water. Malaria from the bite of an infected mosquito. So how do we prevent these particular diseases? Malaria is prevented by sleeping underneath insect-proof nets impregnated with insecticide. So insecticide kills the mosquitoes. Spread of flu prevented by putting your hand over your mouth and your nose when you cough or you sneeze, using a handkerchief, or even sneezing into your elbow, as they described at the start of COVID-19. Athlete's foot prevented by good hygiene and not walking around barefoot in public places, wearing things like flip-flops, okay, drying your feet to make sure that there's no moisture to encourage the fungal spores to grow. Salmonella prevented by correct storage and preparation of food, particularly of raw chicken. HIV prevented by using a condom and drug users not sharing needles. And cholera prevented by keeping drinking water separate from the water used for bathing and sewage. In your booklet, you also have a multiple choice quiz, which isn't in this PowerPoint. So if I can just end the show and go to here, this multiple choice quiz, have a go, see if you can complete that, and I will provide the answers, okay, on Moodle for you. So back to the second part of this lesson, and the second part of this lesson is looking at understanding how the body defends itself, okay, especially the role of lymphocytes or white blood cells. So you've got a diagram that looks like a body in the middle. So this is one of the pictures we've got. So your biggest defense mechanism in your body is actually your skin, because it covers your entire surface of your body and it forms a barrier to germs. If we get a cut though in this skin, okay, then that means that germs can get in. So if germs get in, you find that your defense mechanisms, your white blood cells, will go direct to that site of that cut to try and stop the microbes from reproducing quickly and causing potential infection. So we're going to be looking at that in a bit more detail later. We also have your hair follicles on your skin. There are glands just beneath them attached to the actual hair follicle that make an antiseptic oil. This kills most germs and keeps the skin supple. So sometimes actually overusing soap can make your hands go dry, and I'm sure you've experienced that with all the alcohol hand gel that people have been using recently. If the microorganism gets into the eye, the tear glands also make an antiseptic liquid that kills germs, and blinking will spread this liquid over the surface of your eye to prevent further infection. You may breathe in microorganisms, and back in Key Stage 3 we learnt that the goblet cells, okay, make the mucus, and so they need lots of ribosomes to make this mucus. The mucus traps the microorganisms in the air passageways down to the lungs, and then the ciliated cells, they waft this mucus containing all the microorganisms back up your nose, okay, and out up through your nose and your throat so you can get rid of them. And finally here, your stomach lining makes acid, hydrochloric acid, that kills most of the germs on your food. However, if you've eaten something that's well past its sell-by date, or that has been infected with and contaminated with other microorganisms, the stomach acid may not be enough to destroy them, so they may survive and cause you to have a tummy upset. So these are some of the different defense mechanisms. Intact skin, covering the entire surface, forming a barrier, so it prevents microbes entering. If you cut your skin, you get blood clots forming a scab, so that seals the wounds and prevents any further microbes entering. Your breathing passages have cilia, these hairs which trap the microbes and waft them back up the nose. The hairs produce this slightly acidic substance, and so do the tears, produce this antiseptic substance, and the stomach is acidic. And white blood cells, we're going to go on and look at those in a little bit more detail. So this body defences task on this page, you can see some numbers around the body. They should be clues as to how the body defends itself. If you go to the interactive body resource, it can be found on WJEC's digital resources. So I'm just going to discard that, go to the interactive body that we can see here. And all you do in this task is you click on the different parts of the body and it will tell you how they defend the body against microorganisms. So if we start with number 1, so you've got tears wash the surface of the eye. Every time you blink, they contain the enzyme lysozyme, which destroys any microbes which may try to settle here. So in that box on the top right, can you fill that in for me? Pause the video. For number 2, the mucus in the trachea traps any microbes which might invade and damage the lungs. So we can see the mucus sitting here on the top of the cilia, and the cilia brush this mucus up the trachea so that it can either be swallowed, and if it's swallowed, it goes into the stomach, where most of the time the acid in the stomach will destroy any microbes that are in the mucus. However, it's never a good idea to swallow the mucus that you create. Better to blow your nose and get rid of it that way. Okay, so fill that in on number 2. Pause the video. Number 3, microbes which are swallowed are usually killed by the acid in the stomach, which is hydrochloric acid, and it's around about pH 2. Pause the video, fill that one in. And number 4, good microbes in the gut not only help out with digestion, but they also compete with the pathogenic microbes and prevent them multiplying and causing problems. So we do actually have natural bacteria already in our gut assisting us with digestion. So they're the 4 boxes on the right hand side of the body. Pause the video and make sure you filled those in. Number 5, the skin provides barrier to microbes so they can't get into your body where they would receive warm, moist, nutrient-filled environments where they can multiply rapidly. Skin is also slightly acidic to deter microbial growth, and the sweat and the oils are antiseptic and they help to kill many microbes. Pause the video to fill that one in. Number 6, we can see the process here of the cut skin, so broken blood vessel worn and the blood leaking out, particularly we see the red blood cells. These little orangey yellow dots are representing the platelets, which are fragments of cells, and what they do is they help to cause the blood to clot, preventing any further microbes getting into the wound, okay, by sealing it with this scab. Pause the video and fill that in. You don't need to draw the diagrams. And finally, number 7, when the skin is cut and the microbes enter through the skin, inflammation causes blood to rush to the area. Now, these particular cells that we can see in this animation here are called phagocytes. And phagocytes, that word phago means to eat or ingest, okay? And the phagocytes start to eat and ingest microbes or any foreign particles that have entered. So for example, if this was a thorn that had pierced the skin and there might be microbes on the end of it, then your phagocytes would go to the area, squeeze through the pores in the capillaries, and they engulf, they ingest, okay, and digest the invading bacteria, okay? And you can see them in the animation using lysozymes, which are enzymes in the little vacuoles of the white blood cell to actually break down the material and then release it as a waste afterwards. So pause the video and make sure you've filled in that section. So I'm going to go back to our slideshow now. So hopefully you've completed that. And we're now on the page where it says, how do white blood cells protect us from disease? Now, I've put here that you need to know the names, which I've put in bold here, and you also need to know what each type of white blood cell does. So, we've already mentioned this word phagocyte. A phagocyte is a white blood cell that ingests pathogens. So our pathogen here is represented by our blue blob, and our white blood cell can change its shape and actually surround the pathogen and engulf it, and as we saw in the animation, add enzymes, lysozymes to digest it inside the white blood cell and then eject the waste material. Now, the next type of white blood cell, lymphocytes, okay, they have 2 particular roles to play. And for higher tier, we will be looking in detail as well at what they actually do. So the white blood cells, the lymphocytes, make antibodies. These are represented here by these little kind of like Y-shaped structures. And these antibodies are going to be specific, okay, to structures on pathogens that entered called antigens, okay? So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail later on. So every foreign microbe or substance, dust, pollen, etc., that enters your body has proteins on its surface called an antigen. And these have a particular shape. So the antibodies will have a particular shape that will match the antigen to bind to it, okay? And then they destroy the microorganism. There are also lymphocytes, okay, that produce antitoxins, okay? So we've got antibodies and antitoxins. Just to let you know, that word anti means against, okay? So antibody, you might think it's against your body, but it's not. It's actually against foreign bodies. So antibodies attack foreign bodies. So a foreign body could be, as we've suggested before, a microbe, a pathogenic microbe. It could be pollen, it could be dust, okay? Anything that enters your body that should not be there. So what is an antitoxin? Well, this is against the toxins or poisons that some microorganisms release. So bacteria are notorious for producing toxins or poisons that make us feel unwell. So some of those symptoms that we get are things like throwing up, sickness, diarrhea, a rash, a high temperature, and they're caused by these poisons. So what these lymphocytes do is they make antitoxins, we can see their shape here, that bind to the poisons, the toxins, to neutralise them, to make sure that they don't cause any harm. So can you pause the video, fill in the boxes on the page on how white blood cells protect us from disease to show the three main ways that white blood cells protect us. So we're going to go on to a little bit more detail about, okay, the immune response. And you can find this at this website link here, okay? But I've put it into this PowerPoint as well, all of the images, okay? So we've got 3 flowcharts on the opposite page. This is called friend or enemy. So as I said to you previously, any foreign substance that enters your body is covered with molecules called antigens, okay? So, for example, this brown kind of sausage-shaped structure, okay, is supposed to be some kind of cell, or it could be pollen, it could be a microbe, it could be anything, and it's covered with green squares, and these green squares are our antigens, okay? They are protein fragments, okay, or carbohydrate molecules, okay, that are specific to that particular cell or pollen or microbe. So in the first box, you need to fill in this text, okay, to show what an antigen actually is. In the box underneath then, there are millions of different antigens, and each one has a unique shape that can be recognised by the white blood cells of your immune system. Your white blood cells then produce an antibody to match the shape of the antigen. Now, whereas before the antibody in the previous slides, okay, were Y shapes, you can see that this Y shape would not fit our green square. So instead, we have a different shape. We have one that has like a cube shape. So the white blood cells produce the antibodies to match the shape of the antigens. But this can take its time. So can you fill in the second box? Pause the video to complete. In the third box then, we can see that the antibodies, these are the grey structures, have attached themselves to the antigens on this particular microbe, and that will then destroy the microbe so that it's no longer able to reproduce, okay, and cause the problems that it may do. So can you fill in that last bit, okay, of that box? So this would be that they are antibodies that have been made by the white blood cells, attach themselves to the antigens on the microbe to destroy it. Turn over the page then. We're now going to look at the lymphocyte response to infection, okay? So in this example here, we've got a pathogen entering the body. So here's our brown pathogen with its green structures on the outside. So I think they're more circular rather than square this time. So you need to fill that first of all in the top right hand box. So this is our pathogen entering the body. This grey structure is our white blood cell, and it starts to recognise that this is foreign, okay? This microbe here is foreign, and so it recognises that on the surface these foreign antigens are not like the antigens that are on the surface of your normal body cells. So everybody's body cells has antigens specific to them. And anything that enters your body that is foreign, that has a different antigen, your white blood cells are going to recognise as being foreign, and they're going to start to increase in numbers so they can attack it. So they start to produce the antibodies. So we can see the Y-shaped structures here. So that goes in the second box. The white blood cells then multiply. They actually clone themselves, okay? So remember, cloning is asexual reproduction. So all of these specific white blood cells, these lymphocytes, okay, would be exactly the same. So they would all be able to make, okay, many more antibodies, okay? And the reason why we want more antibodies is this little microbe here is going to be starting to reproduce itself. So it will increase its numbers. So we need more of these antibodies to start to attach to it to destroy. So fill in the box to show the white blood cell multiplying or cloning itself to make more antibodies. In the last box, the antibodies are released into the blood. They attach to the pathogens that carry the original antigen, and this kills the pathogen, okay? So it's basically destroyed. And then these cells, these lymphocyte cells, remain as what we call memory cells. And the reason why they remain is they don't remain in high numbers, but if the same pathogen enters your body at another point, then the memory cells recognize it and they're able to make these antibodies far faster. And that's how our immune system works, okay? So what about our phagocyte response to infection? We're going to leave the numeracy activity worksheet because that actually doesn't work anymore on the WJC website. So we're going to look at the phagocyte response to infection. So here we can see another pathogen. This time it's an orange-shaped sausage, okay? And this pathogen has got into your body through a cut, okay? On the pathogen, we can see some green triangular-shaped antigens, okay? So these are the protein antigens that are specific to this particular pathogen. And once it's got into the blood through the cut, then phagocytes, the white blood cells that we talked about previously, are the first on the scene. They are what we call the first line of defense. They will travel in the blood specifically to the area where the body's been cut. The phagocyte surrounds the pathogen and the cytoplasm flows around it. So please fill in these boxes, pause the video to help you fill those in. And as it flows around it, it kind of engulfs it in a vacuole, and you can see it's disappeared completely because it will empty enzymes, those lysozymes, into the vacuole to digest it. Finally, the phagocytes also engulf and digest pathogens which have been destroyed by the antibodies made by lymphocytes. So whereas our lymphocytes clump the pathogens together with the antibodies, these phagocytes do a really good job, if you like, of hoovering those up, of cleaning up the body, okay, and making sure that none of the remnants of the foreign particle and the antibodies kind of remain anymore. But it's the memory cells that hang around to help produce more antibodies later on to defend your body. And we're going to look at that in the process of vaccination in the next lesson. So this is double award biology higher only. This page isn't in your book, okay, but I'm just going to go over it with you. We've got our white blood cell, sometimes called a B cell, okay, and it would be the type of white blood cell that is a lymphocyte. This recognises our antigen. So here's our pathogen, our microorganism, the red kind of like cylinder here. And can you see there's yellow kind of semicircles? They are representing the antigens. So the white blood cell recognises these yellow semicircular antigens as being foreign to the body. The lymphocyte cell divides, okay, to create a lymphocyte that's going to start to make the antibody that's specific to the antigen. And if you look at the shape of these antibodies here, these blue structures are the antibodies. They have that crescent semicircular shape cut out of them, ready so the antibodies can bind to the antigen and destroy the foreign cell. But also the B cell, when it divides, it creates our memory cells that I mentioned earlier. And the memory cells will produce the antibodies quickly next time round, okay, the antigen is found. So that word, quickly or faster, is key in helping you pick up marks, okay, in the exam. So when you get a second infection of the same microorganism, the memory cells remember the antigen and they create the lymphocytes to make the antibodies much faster. So you sometimes don't even realise you've picked up the infection the second time round. You don't have any symptoms because your white blood cells have sprung into action and started to make these antibodies far quicker. Okay, so this diagram is to help you understand the process of immunity. Okay, make sure you remember the key facts and you know the difference between these words antigen and antibody. You know lymphocyte, phagocyte. For higher tier, you need to know that the lymphocyte, the B cell, divides to make memory cells and that these hang around and will produce the antibodies far faster the next time the same antigen is found. Okay, so that is the end of this lesson. Our next lesson will deal with immunity and vaccination. Thank you.